Did you know that many ancient cultures believed that the stars and constellations held divine messages? In fact, some biblical scholars argue that certain constellations may have been used to convey spiritual truths long before the Bible was written. The ancient Greeks, for example, saw the constellations as a way to tell stories about their gods and goddesses, while other cultures believed that the positions of the stars could influence the fate of humanity. This idea has been around for thousands of years, and it's still a topic of fascination today. Many people are skeptical about the idea that constellations can convey secret messages from the Bible. They argue that the constellations are simply random patterns of stars that have been interpreted in different ways by different cultures. This skepticism is understandable, given that there's no concrete evidence to support the idea that the constellations hold hidden meanings. However, this lack of evidence hasn't stopped people from speculating about the possible connections between the stars and biblical scripture. The concept of constellations as a means of conveying spiritual truths is often met with ridicule by the scientific community. Scientists point out that the constellations are just a product of human imagination, and that the positions of the stars have changed over time due to the Earth's rotation. Despite this, many people continue to believe that there's more to the constellations than just a pretty pattern of stars. They see the constellations as a way to connect with something deeper and more meaningful, a way to tap into the divine. The debate about the significance of constellations has been ongoing for centuries, with some people believing that they hold the key to unlocking hidden truths about the universe and our place in it. Others see them as nothing more than a form of entertainment, a way to tell stories and spark the imagination. Whatever the truth may be, it's clear that the constellations continue to captivate and inspire people to this day. The Book of Job, for example, contains a passage that describes the constellation of Orion as a symbol of God's power and strength. Similarly, the Book of Psalms contains a passage that describes the constellation of Ursa Major as a symbol of God's guidance and protection. These passages, and others like them, have led some scholars to believe that the ancient Israelites may have seen the constellations as a way to connect with the divine. The constellation of Scorpius, for example, is associated with the story of the serpent in the Garden of Eden. According to this interpretation, the scorpion's tail represents the serpent that tempted Eve, while the scorpion's claws represent the curse that God placed upon the serpent. This is just one example of how the constellations might be connected to biblical scripture, but there are many other interpretations out there. The constellation of Cassiopeia, for example, is associated with the story of the queen who boasted about her beauty. According to myth, Cassiopeia was placed in the heavens as a punishment for her arrogance, and her constellation is said to represent the chair or throne that she sat upon. This story, and others like it, have been used to illustrate the moral lessons of the Bible, and to provide a deeper understanding of the biblical narrative. One of the most compelling pieces of evidence for the idea that constellations hold secret biblical messages is the fact that many of the constellations seem to be connected to biblical stories and themes. The constellation of Andromeda, for example, is associated with the story of the princess who was sacrificed to a sea monster. This story, and others like it, have been used to illustrate the biblical theme of sacrifice and redemption. The fact that these stories are reflected in the constellations suggests that there may be more to the idea of celestial messages than initially meets the eye. The constellations of Perseus and Orion are also connected to biblical themes, with Perseus representing the hero who slays the monster and Orion representing the hunter who pursues his prey. These constellations, and others like them, have been used to illustrate the biblical themes of good versus evil and the struggle between light and darkness. The fact that these themes are reflected in the constellations suggests that there may be a deeper connection between the celestial bodies and the biblical narrative. The connection between the constellations and biblical scripture is a complex and multifaceted one, and there's still much to be learned about the significance of the stars in ancient cultures. However, by exploring the different interpretations of the constellations and their connections to biblical themes, we can gain a deeper understanding of the biblical narrative and the ways in which it has been influenced by celestial bodies. In conclusion, the idea that constellations hold secret biblical messages is a fascinating one that continues to capture the imagination of people around the world. Whether or not you believe in the idea of celestial messages, it's clear that the constellations have played an important role in shaping our understanding of the biblical narrative. If you've enjoyed this video, be sure to leave your thoughts in the comments below, and don't forget to check out our other videos on biblical mysteries and celestial phenomena.